For me, it was extremely emotional. As a matter of fact, um, tears, because I just couldn't believe, and I'm still struggling with believing that someone feels that my story is worthy of being told. So I had a moment, probably for the first time in this whole journey since writing it and thinking about it, you know, in real time, this thing is happening.
I think something happens when you see something that has lived inside your head begin to live outside of you. And as you hear words come through the filter of other people's voices, and you see textures on those words that you may not have attended to in the writing, now it has taken on a life of its own. It's a powerful, powerful birthing process.
I was really moved by the commitment from the actors and the sense of self, I guess I'd say, that they found in the material. I was moved by that because these are actors, they work all the time, a lot of them. And so I can tell this project is very special to them, and they're gonna, like my mama used to say, put their foot in it.
You know, Steve, if I could just piggyback on that, one of the things that came out for me in listening, in some cases, I want to believe that this is the first time someone have read the script out loud. And so even though one individual was reading their lines, other people were having a feeling as it related to the words, right. And they were verbally making the acknowledgement because they made the connection to right. the words. And the other thing is, I'm never surprised about the level of ignorance that a lot of us have around stories that we've been told and not told. Mm-hmm. And when we are exposed to new information, the light just comes on to where, you know, I didn't know that. Yeah. Yeah. Why don't I know that? Mm-hmm. And what else don't I know?
Well, I was just talking to the prop person, and she wasn't aware that slavery wasn't in all of Africa. When she heard it was only West Africa primarily, mm-hmm. she was surprised. She said, really? Because she's trying to identify props and baskets in particular, and she didn't realize that. So that, I mean, it happens all the time. People say, oh, I didn't know that.
I was going to say the point that was joyous to me was, and it's what you do and it's what we do to remind ourselves of our brilliance and our geniuses. When we began to talk about the inventions and the innovations and how the spirit in the room just rose just a little bit. There was a joyousness that began to kind of shift the atmosphere in some senses, because we had been in places that are injurious to us, right? And being able to travel through that, but that's not where we land. Yeah, we're rising, and that's the trajectory of the piece. Is we start in places of excellence and brilliance and the ability to breathe and be fully who you are when we start in Mother Africa, and then we travel to some places. It's this journey that we travel on together, and then we rise up out of that, because that's not who, at the end of the day, we are.
The red carpet of Black brilliance, I mean, people, I felt, were literally tickled by it. Because when they were saying, you know, ice cream scoop, you know, one of the actors, she was tickled by it. And, you know, we're applauding and they're kind of laughing. And yeah, it was.
You know, it's interesting because the word play brings certain connotations and expectations from people. And although we're employing it, in my mind, this really is an experience. And I keep saying that to myself. That's where I started, and that's what I see happening. As audience come in, what they're going to do is experience the museum in a new way, from the sense of some of the portions of the museum are now going to take on shape and body and life in a way different than they may have if they had come and seen an artifact and didn't have a context for that artifact. You know, so as you put those things in context and they begin to just rise, I think that it makes the experience and the knowledge that's gained from the experience richer, deeper, and personal. And at the end of the day, I really think this is an invitation to an experience that has the potential of broadening who you are and the lens through which you see the world.
Yeah, so thank you for asking. The question was asked, why the museum into a play? I'll just never forget an experience I had with Steve at a festival, no, actually, I think it was Festival Sunjata, and one of Steve's co-workers I had taken through a personal tour of the museum. He said, well, Delbert, you should think about making this into a play. I said, why? He said, because that's the museum, but you're the story. And so it kind of speaks to this whole journey of mine on belonging and self-affirmation, that a lot of times I look at the museum as being the thing, but in essence, I bring the museum to life. And so if that's true, why not bring that to life through a medium of a play?
So it took a while to actually find a writer, and you know, it's really almost an accident that we jumped up and said, oh, Vita, it was COVID, and Vita says, hey, well, we were going to Africa, and someone had mentioned doing some theater in Africa, and we wound up not going because of COVID, and so Vita says, oh, I got an idea. I know I can start. And of course, that part is not even in the play anymore. But that kind of kicked us into gear, meeting and talking about it. I mean, that's like how we developed it. But I think the other answer is that theater is such a powerful tool to communicate emotion and to engage people in such a way. Because people, and this is a great quote, people will forget what you did, they'll forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you make them feel. And I think theater is one of the most powerful mediums for having people feel, and that's what I think this story will do for people. It will allow them to feel what is going on in the world of black folks and for all of us.
Well, if I can speak to that, so you know, in most cultures, I'm going to talk about African culture, it's not uncommon for there to be a griot. And long before the written word, it was pretty common for a particular elder to sit children around, I'll say, a fire and tell stories. And the purpose of telling those stories is to make sure that those stories get remembered and passed on. And so this is just an example, in my view, of us creating a healthy space to sometimes have difficult conversations, but really to have conversations that we all really want to have, but don't know quite how to start.
And I think in some senses the storyline of Delbert's life, you know, born in 1954, and what does that mean for a black child, boy child, born in 1954? How do you move from that, you know, beginning to move to the place where you have now a life work that is geared around the healing and the empowerment of his community and his people? So how do you get from here to here? What does that look like? And so some of this story is about that journey that he himself had to go on, going back to get what was needed from our past, from our ancestors, from our history, from Mother Africa, and bringing that forward through the various segments of our history that have shaped us and shaped him. And then, you know, it has this ripple effect. And how those things become the springboard for his life now, his work now, and the exposure that he gives people to truths that might not otherwise be told. Because after all, you are the lion.
Yes, yes. You know, the name of the play is The Lion Tells His Tale. I like to focus on the word until, right? Because I think that really encompasses what our responsibility is, each individual, to accept that responsibility of telling their story. Because if we're not willing to tell it, no one will really know what stories we're holding.
And the play is framed in the same way that the museum is, in that the first part, or the first section, is Mother Africa. And then the second part is chattel slavery. Third part is
The Jim Crow era.
the Jim Crow era. Had a lapse there for a moment. This is the Jim Crow era. And then inventions. And the thing about it is, it's not necessarily chronological. I mean, I know it is. But when you get to the inventors, we step back in history and pull out inventors from way back all the way up to until now. So it's framed just like the museum, but we do follow Delbert in his journey to from, I call it, from harm to discovery, and ultimately to identity and enlightenment, so to speak. So we can identify with Delbert and his path, and I hear it all the time when we, just as today, when we read through the script, and people were humming and hawing and yeah, oh.
I think when you tell your story, as you said, Delbert, before, it invites other people to tell their story. It invites them to be a part of your story because they see reflections of themselves, and if it's not them that they see their mama, they see granddaddy, you know, they see what is real to them as a reflection in that story, and then it causes them to be able to tell their story too, more freely, and recognize the value of their story. So when we, you know, as a society, when we value the stories of every person, then we have a rich tapestry from which to pull. But when we only want to hear certain voices,
Or told a certain way.
Told a certain way, it's like we only get to have one kind of flower in the world, and all the rest of you just need to be gray or black or no color up in here, right?
Well, you know, when we talk about age, I just like to think about the assignment that I was given by the Creator. He said, I need you to help save my children. And if we all understand that we're all children of God, my language, then the question becomes, how do we create a space for all people to heal? So the work is primarily geared for pre-K to 12th grade Black and brown students, but actually everybody can benefit from the way the story is told, because it's really not necessarily taught through a racialized lens. The goal is to teach through a humanity lens.
Yeah, I mean, the play is for all ages, it's for everyone. And, or I should say, the experience is for everyone. Everyone will enjoy the experience. You know, there's music, there's dance, and culturally, it's soulful, it's Black. But everyone is welcome to enjoy it, and I know everyone will. So that's what I would say in terms of who is it for. You know, for young people, it being focused, the work being focused on young people, because young people are able to learn, they're fresh in their perspective, but they also don't have the same things that maybe we grew up with in terms of the history of, or even, I mean, in my day, if I said Black history was American history, people would look at me like I was crazy. No, that's not the case. But now we're further along, and we understand that Black history is American history. So there's just, you know, we're ever evolving in our understanding and what we're, just like, you know, my mother was Negro, but I'm Black. So we evolve in this understanding of race and culture in this country.
And I think there has to be a certain element of curiosity that the audience themselves bring to the piece as well, right? What don't you know? What would you like to know? And what will you do to know? I think those are the challenging questions for all of us as we move through life, right? Am I content to stay contained where I am? Or am I curious enough to go seek the unknown and grow from it? And I think there's some content in here that people just don't know.
So if I could just piggyback on what both Steve and Beta said, you know, it just became apparent to me that the play is a call to action, right? So the question becomes, what are we willing to do different for something different to happen? You know, we're in a society now, in a world now, where things are really getting very unique, right? That's a political term, unique. But the reality is nothing's going to change if we're willing to individually and collectively willing to make a sacrifice.